Good morning, good afternoon, and good day everybody. David here, and in today's video we are looking at the Asgardian Thunder God himself, Thor. Thor is probably the most popular hero currently in the game, and it's easy to see why. His melee and range attacks can do serious damage to both groups and single target enemies, as well as his ability to stack a range of status types makes him just an absolute beast to use. So in this vid, we will cover my gear, recommended stats, and also an in-depth look at his moves, skill tree, and tips on how to use him in combat and get the most out of him. But let's jump in. First thing to look at is his stats. The way I like to use Thor, and the way this build is set up, is using both melee and range abilities to do just crazy damage, as well as taking advantage of crits and being right in the thick of combat. So I have 230 might, 111 precision, 124 on our crit chance, with 107 on our max health. We also use the Tacticon major artifact for that boost in melee damage, and it also increases the damage with status effects. The minor artifacts are just used to bump up any stats the gear couldn't do, so I prioritised melee and range damage. Now, the gear. I have two melee pieces that I swap between, depending on what status effect I want to prioritise. My favourite being this one. It has 17.4% chance that light combos provide a damage buff, as well as light signature moves providing a gamma effect. On top of that, we have 212% increased health regen when Odin Force is active. This is great because our melee attacks will give us a damage boost, on top of the ridiculous damage that his signature move already does. And the health regen combines with a perk in his skill tree that heals us with every melee hit whilst we are in Odin Force. So we'll go in a bit more depth with this later in the video. The other melee gear I like isn't that great a perk roll, but it's mainly for the PIM particle damage on signature attacks. So if you could get something with similar gear perks as the previous piece, but also with PIM damage, that would be very good. Thor's signature light move is his hammer spin. This move is fantastic and it does so much damage, and it does incredible stun damage as well to both single targets and groups of ads. It also hits so many times that it applies status effects really easily. This will be one way that we get big damage on enemies, which again we'll cover later in this build. Now the range gear we have is insane. This was a very lucky drop for me. I got it from the Tachyon Rift missions. We have 25% chance our range power attacks grant a defense buff, as well as a 52% chance defeating an enemy with a critical range power attack gives us a damage buff. Then we were blessed with cosmic damage on our range power attacks. So the synergy here is just crazy good. We also have a secondary piece that gives us added lightning damage to our lightning attacks, plus 19% chance of a damage buff on range power attacks, and a 27% chance defeating an enemy with a range critical attack grants an invulnerability buff. Now Thor's range power attack is the hammer throw that he does where you spin it up to charge it first. When you combine this with the Odin Force and certain perks in the mastery section of the skill tree, this move can do insane damage, as well as just crazy shock area of effect damage. Now with this chest piece, I'm yet to find anything with like crazy good perks. I did however get a decent chest piece that gives me a few defense buffs, which is what I wanted, as currently my stat distribution is struggling the most in the defense section. But the belt I got is pretty good. I have an 18% stun increase on my signature attacks, so this stacks with my hammer spin move, which already does crazy stun damage, as well as a 28% chance of a health bump when using my assault heroic, and finally a 18% increased charge rate on my support heroic. So we'll be getting our heroics back a lot faster, and they also help keep us alive. Your support heroic is Warrior's Fury. So activating this supercharges your Odin Force and gives you lightning damage on all attacks. We have combined this with the ability to give our teammates a 25% damage boost, as well as a critical attack damage increase of 25%, and a critical chance buff of 10% to anyone affected by Warrior's Fury. This works hand in hand with our Odin Force ability. Moving on to Thor's Assault Heroic, the God Blast. This lifts enemies into the air, rendering them inactive before blasting them with shock damage. I like to pair this with the perk that increases the damage by 20% as well as applying a cryo effect. I then recommend using either the perk that gives you a refund of 5% God Blast energy for every enemy you defeat with this move, because you lift so many people up and you're blasting so many people with the lightning damage. You can clear out just groups of adds and sometimes get your God Blast energy back almost instantly. Or the perk that gives you another 20% damage increase if you use God Blast whilst overcharged. But this is better for just taking out those tankier targets. I prefer getting the ability back more often, so I tend to use the prior perk, but both are really strong. So it's up to you and how you want your build to play out. Now Thor's ultimate is incredible. You summon the Bifrost into just a massive blast radius that you can move about. This does high damage in a wide area and can be made even more ridiculous with the other perks. So I combine the Bifrost with the perk that does 50% extra damage if you summon it whilst the blast radius is red, as well as either the perks that release a cryo or burn area of effect. This will depend on what status effects I have on my melees and range attacks, and again this will be explained in a bit more detail later on, but to quickly go over it now. If I'm using the cryo effect on my Bifrost, I would pair that with the Him Particle signature attack on my melee gauntlets, and if I'm using the burn effect on my Bifrost, I will pair that with the Gamma gauntlets that I have. I then finally combine the perk that recovers 50% of my health when I use the Bifrost attack. So this is great as a sort of get out of jail free card, and for when you want to just go all in on attacking and to make the most of the AoE effect without the risk of getting knocked down. With Thor's Mastery Tree, the perks I like to use are the following: a 15% increase on all range attacks. This affects his hammer throw as well as any lightning. An increase in combo finisher damage by 25%. This mainly affects our melee attacks and stacks with the damage buff perk that is in our melee armor. Takedowns create heroic orbs. This is just a must-have for all your heroes. Impact Explosion. This is probably the most important perk for getting just huge damage numbers with your range attacks, as this actually counts as a range power attack when used with your hammer throw, and therefore stacks with the perks on our range armor. You'll see when I break down this build in depth later on just how important this perk is. I like the hammer throw that breaks through enemy blocks and can pin them down, as I can use this mid combo to easily break their guard, or I can use it to pin them down so they're no longer a threat whilst I heal or collect orbs or whatever. Dodge Flight. This is just so we can start the fight with some free damage and you also look like a total badass when you land. Then another important perk, Force of Will. The dealing any kind of damage whilst Odin Force is active will recover 1.2% health per hit. So this stacks with our 212.5% increase on our health regen that's on our melee gauntlets. Plus, with Thor's Hammer Spin and lightning AoE attacks, you're just getting so many hits that your health just skyrockets. Then we have takedowns give us Odin Force energy, and Thor's Odin Force ability is key to just mastering him, so getting the most out of it, having it up as often as possible is a must. Reduce the cost of using Odin Force by 10%. When overcharged, surrounded enemies will be struck by lightning. This stacks with the Warrior's Fury support heroic really nicely. Increased damage resistance by 50% when overcharged. This is a great defense buff, and again stacks with the defense buffs on our armor. And finally, a 15% damage increase when overcharged. There's so many of these buffs stack with other buffs that we have, and it just makes Thor's damage output and his defense just insane. Now, to fully understand how to utilize these, you must understand the Odin Force ability. You hold right trigger to activate Odin Force. Odin Force counters incoming attacks, and if timed right, can also parry. It can then be upgraded to boost melee attacks with shock damage, and using the Divine Chaos perk, it can be overcharged by continuously attacking enemies without taking damage. Once overcharged, Odin Force will auto-activate and stays active until you either take damage, you counter, or you cease to attack. This ability is just so good, and after mastering it makes Thor the completely OP god that he is. Now it's time to talk about using Thor correctly. He's an absolute beast and wants to get just right into the thick of combat. This is why I have prioritized his melee attacks and have so many defense and damage buffs, as well as ways of healing by attacking. Another thing that makes Thor so good is his intrinsic lightning. This is a free negative status effect that's actually built into his class. So here's the fun part. When using a positive power throw status effect, like the one we have with our cosmic hammer, this stacks with the negative lightning, providing huge exploit damage just unto itself. This is when that impact explosion mastery perk comes into play, as that then also does exploit damage, but in a big AoE. And then, if you stack all that with the power of Uru intrinsic perk, by pressing right trigger or using Odin Force, you can just keep summoning lightning, which keeps doing exploit damage. This is actually just broken. And if all that didn't get you excited, there's still more to come. We can combine all this with the negative or positive damage of our hammer spin, as your range attacks are covering both status types. But what makes my setup crazy is stacking the cosmic lightning with a gamma melee. Once defeated, that gamma enemy poisons other nearby enemies, who then become affected by gamma damage. And then they're also getting hit by the AoE lightning, and we are healing whilst we use Odin Force and damaging them thanks to the Force of Will perk. And then cosmic damage heals us per hit for anyone affected by it. And then on top of that, we get that 212% health recovery from our armor, and it still gets better. So we have Gamma, Shock and Cosmic damage covered so far. If we use Thor's God Blast and Bifrost, we can then add Cryo and Burn / Plasma damage to the list. So that's given us 5 of the 6 status effects, just all by himself, and they will stack together causing exploit damage just constantly. You can then use his support heroic to have immediate overcharge Odin Force, which causes even more lightning and exploiting even more targets. I just can't express just how ridiculous this is, and this is why his range attacks and melee attacks should be as high as possible on the stat bar, but are also interchangeable when it comes to status effects. The reason I like my setup is the cosmic lightning exploiting off of itself because of the cosmic and shock damage, as well as the gamma hammer stacking with both the lightning and the Bifrost burn. So after calling in the Bifrost, I can go in for as many hammer spin attacks as possible, and it just does huge damage. By having a Cryo God Blast as well, that also provides exploit damage in conjunction with the Bifrost burn and the cosmic lightning. So this build has just so many ways of getting exploit damage, it's just insane. So to try and summarize, with Thor you really are just an elemental god. The chaining his melees with both lightning and hammer throws, and also using his Odin Force is key. And you can stack all of his attacks and heroic abilities at once for just insane huge DPS, or you can pop them back to back for longer periods of damage. You can then improve this build with just better armor than I have, to be honest. If you got a better chest piece or a belt, but even without those things, with just the melee and range gauntlets and the perks that we have in conjunction with what Thor can do, this build and Thor in general a must try for everyone. So thanks a lot for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learnt something. Apologies again for it being slightly longer, but I wanted to try and cover as much as possible just so you can clearly see how ridiculous Thor is. Please leave in the comment section below if you've got a crazy Thor build yourself, or just what you think of him in general in comparison to the other characters. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe is very much appreciated. It helps the channel grow and it helps me know what content you enjoy. If you want to join my community, I stream over on Facebook. The link will be down in the description below, and I stream every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. So I hope to see you there. But until next time, I shall love you and leave you. Stay safe, stay positive, and hopefully I shall see you all very soon. Bye bye.